Capital Record, where we defend free enterprise and capital markets because we believe in the dignity of the human person. Hello and welcome to David Bonson's Capital Record, brought to you by National Review. We did an episode a couple days ago I really want to direct you to, if you missed it, on the new right's idea of economics and their celebration of a free market economy that was part of their creed when national conservatism first launched a number of years back, and why some of the things that they started off committed to have gone astray in ways that I argue were totally predictable. And I encourage you to check out that podcast if you're interested in that subject. And if you're not interested in that subject, I suggest you get interested in that subject, because I think it is of paramount importance, which is why Capital Record exists, that we defend a market economy and a free and virtuous society from its opponents on the right or left. And today we have an issue to discuss that is right down the middle in terms of why Capital Record exists, which is real life, contemporary issues wherein the principles of a free enterprise system are called into question. And the issue is that of AI, the artificial intelligence world, and where things stand right now as it pertains to the framework going forward by which technological progress will happen or not happen, and what it will look like and what it will mean. And I want to start off with a couple parameters in terms of what I'm not talking about here today. What I'm not talking about are the very legitimate issues that should be discussed around cultural implications. You know, there are those that are fearful of AI trying to replace certain human functions, and there is dystopian concerns, there is transhumanist agenda, and other things like that that are very worthy conversations, but nevertheless, I believe different than the subject at hand. Ultimately, I come to this subject with the same belief system I come to all subjects with, which is that the human person was created by God certain ways, and those things are immutable. Human nature is not subject to change from a computer. Bad things can be made worse. Good things can be made better. All sorts of things can be redeemed, but what can't be done is a total rewiring of the very nature of the human person. And so those issues can be discussed another time. I also would say that what I'm not here to discuss today are those fearful of AI from a protectionist standpoint, that, you know, a kind of Luddite or even just generic fear of creative destruction that says because AI is going to take away certain jobs, we need to resist it. Whether it's AI or any other form of technology, evolution, digital revolution, the industrial revolution, I take for granted that there is always, in a dynamic economy, certain jobs that become obsolete, and that it is futile. It is counterproductive to resist it. What is very productive and very, I think, in demand is to embrace it so that we can get in front of it and mitigate the pain it will cause individual people through proper preparation, retraining, mobility, and whatnot. But to try to have, let's say hypothetically, the Longshoremen's Union put into a contract that they will not have to ever compete against technology. I remember years ago hearing Tucker Carlson say on a podcast that we should absolutely outlaw any automated driving because of the impact it would have to truck drivers, for example. That is not what I'm referring to. I could make the arguments all day long as to how incredibly silly and unfair that is to not only macroeconomic progress, but to specific job holders and future job holders that policy of broken window fallacy represents. But again, I'm not here today to talk about either those cultural moral elements or the protectionist economic side. I'm rather here to talk about, as a Hayekian pro-market, limited government, classical liberal, and everything I hope you know that this podcast represents in defense of a market economy and free society. I'm here to talk about what I believe many in the big tech space and many in the driver of AI space, those that are integrally involved in the ecosystem, that we ought to be resisting what is not them asking for an open framework for progress, but any desire or ask for special favors that are in fact counterproductive to our agenda of an even playing field, an anti-cronyist, free society that goes about our laissez-faire economics in the right way. I will start off with 3 basic statements and then go about defending each of them. The need, number 1, the need for a consistent regulatory framework, not one that creates special favors and exceptions for the big tech power cabal. So I would argue for a consistent regulatory framework, not one creating special favors. Number 2, a thoughtful evaluation is in order of the intellectual property implications of all this. We cannot economically build up the strong and weaken the small by allowing the big to steal from the small. And I believe that there is a lack of appropriate thoughtfulness on the IP implications of what many are wanting to do in the AI space. And number 3, the liability protections. If we're going to celebrate going big and going fast, which is the mantra we hear so often from Silicon Valley, then the actors who benefit from going big and going fast should not be exempted from damage done. Various slander, libel, wrong legal briefs that get created, whatever the case may be. We believe in trade-offs. And before we start giving waivers and immunity to people who want the upside of going big and fast, we should require people to accept the trade-offs. Why does all this need to be said? I think that it is undeniable that some of the brightest minds in our society, some of the most creative, some of the most capable, and people who I want building technological progress to the betterment of the U.S. economy, that includes in the AI space, in Silicon Valley, in our broader technology ecosystem, sometimes out of big VC-funded projects, sometimes things that are connected to large strategic operations. There is a pretty top-heavy investment in AI right now. You look at Microsoft's relationship to OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT. You look at what Elon Musk is doing with Grok. You look at Oracle. You look at, obviously, the NVIDIA, the almost $5 trillion company powering the chips behind so much of this. Yes, I said trillion with a T. You look at the David Saks's and the Mark Andreessen's and some of the VC funding that's behind a lot of this. This is not mom and pop activity, okay? And before we allow them to ask for a regulatory, liability, and intellectual property framework that is to their favor, I think we ought to be moving at a pace that allows us to understand what we're doing and not doing, and allows us to do it on an even playing field in the principle of equal protection under the law, in the principle of the government not picking winners and losers, in the principle of thoughtfulness. Now, one of the limiting principles we've always had that helps things getting too big too fast without the right proper checks and balances is our federalist system of government. And this is something that I think is very problematic, that so many are looking to circumvent states and localities. We believe in the states being laboratories of democracy. And I don't think that we want sweeping federal solutions to help kind of accelerate AI progress that then takes away constitutionally granted, constitutionally delegated power to the states. It would be very counterproductive to curtail the ability of people to speak through their local, state, federal representatives on issues. And that does not mean states ought to have a burdensome regulatory framework, but it does mean that the federal government should not, from a top-down, centralist perspective, be telling states what their AI restrictions, rules, regs ought to be. I do not think big tech should be removed from the regulatory framework that the rest of the world functions in. I do not think they should be removed from the normal subsidiarity of federalism, but nor do I think they should be granted preemptive liability and regulatory immunity, as I have said for years and years, that regulation is a subsidy. And where you get regulatory immunity when you're big and powerful, it is a massive subsidy that will only end one way: to make the big bigger and make the small dead, unable to compete. It will be corporate welfare on steroids to grant regulatory immunity, favoritism to the big. This does not mean to create an unhelpful and burdensome and anti-competitive regulatory framework for the big. It means to give them waivers that benefit them and not others. It is to demand an even playing field. And I think that a great example of the even playing field is to not give them federal legislation that allows them to circumvent localism, that allows them to circumvent federalism, that allows them to say, we don't have to hear from local school boards how you're going to incorporate AI. We have federal ability to just, no matter what, have AI implemented in this way or that way. Now, that does not mean some local school boards will not screw it up, will not do something Luddite, will not do something counterproductive. And it doesn't mean other school boards won't be too permissive. My point being that it is not Hayekian to allow the big and powerful to circumvent the regulatory framework or to get a federal grant to push something through locally that nobody else can get. The same goes, by the way, for zoning issues related to data centers. We're all well aware that we do not have enough power to make this alleged dream of what AI will do happen, and there's a need to construct more data centers. I am invested in data centers. I'm all for there being more power generation. I happen to believe that there's a whole economic ecosystem that goes into this. If you're going to build more data centers, you need more electricity. If you're going to need more electricity, you're going to need more natural gas. If you're going to need more natural gas, you need more pipelines. There's 4 or 5 investable things there. But should they get a special pass that circumvents zoning laws that others can't get? Now, that's not to say that through the right channel, the city councils, the county boards, the states, the different appropriate municipal authorities wouldn't end up granting a data center here and not there and whatever. All I'm saying is that procedurally, we should not be giving them special privileges because they come in with big campaign donations or fancy Silicon Valley speak or promises of some sort of technological divinity. It is not the way our system works. What I'm all at once doing here is demanding growth, progress, technological embrace, but demanding it be done on an even playing field relative to the way the entire economy works. I believe we must put our foot down about liability immunity. That amounts to a subsidy, a special privilege that is unfathomable with a technological tool moving so quickly that no one knows enough about to say that they should be granted immunity. We must not allow a moratorium on regulation. There should not be excessive regulation. There should not be counterproductive or burdensome regulation. We have a very regulated financial services sector, and we have the envy of the world in our capital markets. We have the envy of the world in our pharmaceuticals and far excessive regulatory apparatus there. I don't want to see excessive regulation. That's not what I'm advocating for. What I don't want is for them to get a whole special rule book that waives all forms of regulation that other parts of the technology ecosystem, other competitors in the AI world, or other non-tech companies simply don't get. So a moratorium on regulation amounts to corporate welfare in this case. I do not believe they should be getting preferential tax treatment. Now, fortunately, I'm not seeing a big movement in this direction. I know there are some who want it and ask for it, but saying we need special tax credits, as the EV makers asked for, as certain green energy people asked for, as a whole host of various, and by the way, bipartisan interests over the years have always come with their hand out. Let's just say certain real estate developers over the years have always asked for tax abatements to help drive the need for development, the social good that building, let's say, a Trump Tower would represent in Midtown Manhattan. Those things go back, and businessmen are always going to ask for it. Adam Smith told us that 250 years ago. I'm not talking about these guys asking for it. I'm talking about us giving it to them. There should not be special preferential tax treatment for billionaire tech people. It's just silly. And then finally, the issue I brought up about IP. There is no reason for us to waive intellectual property laws. We have intellectual property laws for a reason. We can get into the complexity of enforcement, and we will get into the complexity of application. But we should not be given blanket immunity from what IP laws represent and allowing things to then move so fast that we realize we did something we didn't intend to do, which many feel we did with social media. My point is to have the even playing field and to protect the laws we already have, such as state and local control, such as zoning, such as the tax laws being applied equally to all, and such as intellectual property. Beyond that, I'm not asking us to go stop AI from being AI. I'm not asking for Luddite restrictions. I'm asking us to move at a pace that is reasonable within our current economic framework and not at a pace that would only be made possible by special privileges to the rich and powerful. This is not a populist message because I don't have a populist bone in my body. This is, frankly, a free market message. Thank you for listening to David Bahnsen's Capital Record. I welcome your feedback. Send this far and wide. Put it in ChatGPT. See what these AI language models have to say about it. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend. Reach out with questions anytime. And I'll see you again in another episode next week of Capital Record.